Welcome back my YouTube channel. My name is Adrian, and today we're covering a case that is profoundly tragic and deeply unsettling. It's a story that really forces you to ask some tough questions. How does a person, especially a child, just vanish from the world while technically still being in it? How can a life end, and that end go completely unnoticed, hidden away in a place that's designed for constant turnover? This isn't a complex whodunit. It's a heartbreaking look at a tragedy that was hidden in plain sight. This story is a difficult one, so I want to remind you that I cover a wide range of true crime and darkly fascinating stories. If that's your kind of thing, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to help the channel out. 1. The setting in our case today takes us to Memphis, Tennessee. Not the Memphis of blues and barbecue that most people think of, but the anonymous landscape of its roadside hotels, specifically the Home Inn Suites on Lawrence Road. Think about it. Places like this are hubs of transit. Thousands of stories pass through their doors every year. They're places of temporary shelter, brief stops on longer journeys, and for some, a place of last resort. For most of us, a hotel room is just a non-place, an impersonal space to rest for a night before moving on. But for others, these rooms become their entire world, their thin walls holding secrets that the rest of us, rushing by on the nearby interstate, could never imagine. And it was inside one of these rooms, in the summer of 2025, that one of those secrets would come to light in the most horrifying way possible. 2. The welfare check. On July 11th, 2025, the staff at the Home Inn Suites grew more and more concerned about a long-term resident, a 46-year-old woman named Kimberly Moore. Kimberly had been staying there for a while, but her behavior had recently become erratic and alarming. She had reportedly been telling employees that her husband owned the hotel, and she was there on his behalf to make sure everyone was doing their jobs. This wasn't just some eccentric guest or a simple misunderstanding. The hotel manager felt a growing unease. Kimberly's claims were bizarre, and her whole demeanor suggested something was very wrong. This wasn't a noise complaint. This was a genuine concern for a person's well-being. Trusting his gut, the manager called the Shelby County Sheriff's Office to request a welfare check. He was hoping deputies could just assess the situation, maybe get Kimberly the help she needed. He could never have guessed the real crisis that was unfolding in that room. When the deputies arrived, they were probably expecting any number of things. Maybe someone having a mental health episode, a domestic dispute, or just a mix-up that could be easily sorted out. But as they approached Kimberly Moore's room, their training was immediately met with something that pointed to a much darker reality. A strong, foul odor was seeping from the room, a smell so powerful it was impossible to ignore. 3. A mother's denial. When Kimberly Moore answered the door, the deputies were met with a confusing scene. They asked her about the overwhelming smell, and her answer was both simple and deeply disturbing. She said she didn't smell anything at all. This denial, this complete disconnect from the physical world around her, was the first major red flag that this was far more than a simple welfare check. It was as if Kimberly was living in a totally different reality, one where the air in her room was perfectly fine. Her insistence just made the officers more concerned, and they knew they had to see inside the room for themselves. With the smell now a clear sign that something was terribly wrong, they stepped past Kimberly and into the dim space she called home. The scene waiting for them was something that even a veteran officer would struggle to process. 4. The discovery in room 324. The air inside the room was heavy, and the source of the terrible odor was immediately obvious. The room was a mess, but the officer's eyes were quickly drawn to the bed. There, lying unresponsive, was the small, frail body of a child. This was Kimberly's daughter, Chloe Moore, When the deputies got closer, they found that her body was cold to the touch and in an advanced state of decomposition. A medical examiner would later describe her condition as mummified, a term that really speaks to how much time had passed since her death. Her body was severely malnourished, and the sealed environment of the hotel room had caused her skin to darken and her body to shrink as it lost moisture over a long period. The room was filled with flies, a final grim testament to the tragedy that had been hidden behind that door. The horror of it was profound. This wasn't an active crime scene. This was the quiet, slow decay of a life that had ended long before. It's a sickening contrast. A child in a bed where she should have been safe had been left to decompose while her mother lived in the very same room, seemingly oblivious to the horror just feet away. The discovery sent a shockwave through the deputies on the scene. This wasn't just a failure to report a death. It felt like a complete collapse of reality itself. 5. A mind in crisis. As the investigation got underway, the focus turned to Kimberly Moore. Her reaction to the discovery of her daughter's body was just as confusing as the scene itself. When detectives questioned her, she refused to give a clear statement. Instead, she just kept repeating that her daughter was still here with her, and God is with her and her daughter. She seemed to be in a complete state of psychosis, unable to acknowledge the physical reality of her daughter's death. To Kimberly, Chloe wasn't gone. She was still there, and any evidence otherwise just wasn't part of her world. Investigators quickly determined that Kimberly was experiencing a severe mental health crisis, plagued by delusions that made it impossible for her to comprehend the tragedy. Kimberly Moore was arrested on the spot. The initial charges weren't for murder, but for abuse of a corpse and failure to report a death. These charges reflected the immediate, undeniable facts of the case. A body had been allowed to decompose without anyone notifying the authorities. It's a charge that speaks to a deep level of desecration. But it left a bigger, more horrifying question unanswered. How did Chloe Moore die? Kimberly was booked into the Shelby County Jail and later released on a $5,000 bond, while a community was left to grapple with the unfathomable details of the case. 6. The unseen child. The most heartbreaking part of this story is the silence around Chloe Moore herself. Who was she? Did she have friends? Did she ever go to school? In the aftermath of the discovery, these questions hung heavy in the air, but the answers were scarce. It seems that Kimberly and Chloe lived a life of deep isolation, invisible to the very systems meant to protect vulnerable children. No one from a school district raised an alarm about an absent student. No neighbors reported any concerns. They existed on the fringes, and Chloe, in the end, slipped through every single safety net that society is supposed to have. Her life and its tragic end serve as a horrifying reminder of how easily the vulnerable can be forgotten. In the busy transient world of a roadside hotel, a mother and daughter could exist for months without anyone truly seeing them or the crisis that was escalating behind their closed door. Chloe's story is a whisper, a tragic testament to a life lived and lost in the shadows, unseen and unheard until it was far too late. 7. The aftermath and unanswered questions. As the legal case against Kimberly Moore moves forward, the Memphis community is left to wrestle with the aftermath. There's a sense of collective shock and regret, with many people wondering how they could have missed the signs, how a child could suffer so much without a single person stepping in. This case cuts deeper than many others because it doesn't seem to be about finding a monster who did a terrible thing. Instead, it appears to be about the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness and the crushing weight of social isolation. The central question, what happened to Chloe, remains. The charges of corpse abuse and failure to report a death are serious, but they don't address her cause of death. Was it a result of the malnourishment that was so obvious on her small frame? Or was there another darker reason she passed away? With Kimberly Moore apparently lost in her own reality, we may never get a clear answer. All that's left is the devastating certainty that a little girl named Chloe died alone in a hotel room, her passing marked only by the passage of time and the slow, silent process of decay. Anyway, folks, that pretty much wraps up our case for today. The story of Chloe Moore is just a profoundly sad one, a case that serves as a grim reminder of the people who live on the margins of our society. It highlights the devastating intersection of mental health crises and the social isolation that can let a tragedy like this happen. Before I go, I'd love to know what you think about this story in the comments down below. Please be respectful, as this is a deeply tragic and sensitive case. Thank you again for spending some time with me today. And as always, remember to look after yourself, look after each other, and of course, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.